3 years after my sister died, I returned to the mountain villa we bought for her wedding, expecting dust and silence. Instead, the house felt alive, clean, warm, occupied. I installed hidden cameras for answers, but what they exposed didn't just explain her death, it ignited a chain of actions no one saw coming. Before I take you through what happened next, do me a small favor, tap subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It helps these stories reach the people who need them most, and it lets me know I'm not telling this into the void. I'm Nolan Reed, 36. A bridge engineer based in Denver. For years, my life followed a straight line: wake before sunrise, black coffee, steel boots, job sites, measurements, calculations, home by dark. No detours. No noise. That routine helped me bury a regret I carried every single day, the regret of not protecting my younger sister, Ilara. Ilara died 3 years earlier in what authorities called a single-car accident. Wet road. Sharp turn. Loss of control. Case closed. Everyone else accepted it. I never did. Ilara was careful to the point of obsession. She double-checked locks, slowed down in drizzle, called me if a tire sounded wrong. The explanation never fit, but I had no proof, only a hollow feeling that something was missing. After the funeral, I stayed away from everything that reminded me of her. Especially the mountain villa. That house sat above a long valley, surrounded by pine and wind. Our parents had pooled savings to help Ilara and her husband, Victor Hale, start their life there. A peaceful place. A promise of quiet. After Ilara died, none of us returned. Victor moved back to the city with their son, Leo. The house was supposed to be empty. Until the dream. The night before everything changed, I dreamed of Ilara standing on that porch, her hair moving in the wind, smiling the way she always did when she wanted to pretend things were fine. She didn't speak. She just looked at me, sad, patient, waiting. I woke up before dawn, heart pounding, hands shaking. By noon, I'd loaded my old pickup and started driving toward the mountains. The road wound higher, the air thinning, pine scent slipping through a cracked window. I rehearsed excuses in my head. I told myself I was just checking the place. Making sure it hadn't collapsed. Saying goodbye properly. Anything but what my gut already knew. When the villa came into view, my foot slammed the brake. The garden was alive. Not just maintained, thriving. Roses climbed the trellis. Marigolds lined the stone path. The lawn was trimmed. Windows were open. Curtains moved gently in the breeze. This wasn't abandonment. This was care. For a moment, I wondered if I'd turned onto the wrong drive. But the house number was right. The slope of the land. The old oak near the fence. Every detail screamed familiarity and violation. My chest tightened. I parked and stepped out, gravel crunching under my boots. The spare key Ilara had given me years ago felt heavy in my pocket. My hand hovered at the door longer than it should have. Then I unlocked it. The smell hit first, lavender. Clean. Warm. Lived in. Inside, everything was immaculate. Furniture polished. Floor spotless. A half-empty glass of water sat on the counter, still cool. Fresh fruit rested in a bowl. The bed upstairs was made, corners tucked with military precision. Someone wasn't just visiting. Someone was living here. I walked room to room, pulse hammering. In the closet, I found a man's jacket that didn't belong to Victor. Next to it, a woman's dress, short, unfamiliar, nothing Ilara would have worn. My hands started to shake. This house wasn't just being used. It was being erased and rewritten. I didn't call anyone. Not yet. Instead, I drove into town, bought a small security system, compact cameras, cloud access, motion alerts. By sunset, I'd installed them quietly, carefully. One in the living room. One facing the driveway. One covering the hallway to the bedrooms. Then I left. For 3 days, nothing happened. On the 4th afternoon, my phone vibrated at the construction site. Motion detected. I opened the feed. Victor stepped into view, keys in hand, moving with the ease of someone who believed he belonged there. Beside him walked a young woman I'd never seen before, confident, laughing, her arm looped through his like this was their private retreat. They kissed at the door. I sat in my truck, staring at the screen, breath shallow. Anger surged, but something else cut deeper. Leo wasn't with them. The child my sister loved more than life itself was nowhere in sight. Over the next weeks, the pattern repeated. Every Friday evening, Victor arrived with the same woman. Every Sunday night, they left. Never once did Leo appear. The cameras captured laughter, wine glasses, music drifting through the rooms where Ilara used to read bedtime stories. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself Victor deserved to move on. But one question refused to let go. Where was my nephew? That question followed me everywhere. Onto scaffolding. Into blueprints. into sleepless nights. Until one Friday afternoon, when I stopped watching from a screen and drove back up the mountain myself. Victor froze when he saw me. The woman stepped back, clutching her bag, eyes sharp with calculation. I introduced myself calmly, forced small talk, asked the question that mattered. Victor dodged. Deflected. Lied badly. I left without confrontation, but I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to Victor's city apartment. The door was unlocked. Inside, I found Leo standing on a chair, trying to cook eggs on a hot stove. Smoke filled the air. His hands trembled. A fresh burn marked his skin. In that moment, everything snapped into focus. My sister hadn't been protected in life. Her child wasn't being protected now. I turned off the stove, wrapped Leo in my arms, and knew with absolute clarity that silence was no longer an option. And that was only the beginning. Because what I uncovered next wouldn't just expose neglect, it would unravel a truth buried for years, one powerful enough to destroy the people who thought they'd gotten away with everything. If you're still with me, stay. What comes next changes everything. I lifted Leo off the chair and sat him at the small kitchen table, my hand steady even though my chest felt like it was tearing open. The apartment was dim, cramped, and smelled faintly of burned oil and cold leftovers. This was where my sister's son was living now. Alone. Fending for himself. Uncle Nolan? Leo whispered, eyes wide, as if he was afraid he'd done something wrong just by existing. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay calm. You didn't do anything bad. I've got you. That seemed to be all it took. The tension drained from his small body at once, like he'd been holding his breath for days. He leaned into me without a word. I noticed how light he felt, too light for a 9-year-old. I cleaned the burn on his hand, gently, apologizing with each touch even though it wasn't my fault. He didn't cry. That scared me more than if he had. Children who don't cry have learned it doesn't help. While he sat at the table, swinging his legs, I opened the fridge. A carton of expired milk. A few apples with brown spots. Nothing else. No prepared meals. No snacks. No signs of a parent thinking ahead. I cooked what I could. Eggs, toast, a simple meal. Leo ate fast, then slower, then looked up at me as if he was worried the food might disappear. When did you last eat? I asked quietly. He shrugged. Yesterday morning. Dad said I'm old enough to handle it. The words hit like a punch. Old enough. At 9. I didn't ask anything else right then. I didn't want to scare him or make him feel like he was betraying his father. I just stayed. I made him comfortable. I told him a story Alara used to tell us when we were kids, about the bridge that was afraid of the river until it learned it was strong enough to stand over it. That night, Leo fell asleep on the couch, curled up around an old stuffed animal. I sat on the floor beside him long after, staring at the wall, replaying everything I'd seen. By morning, I knew I couldn't pretend this was a misunderstanding. I drove Leo to school myself. Walked him to the gate. Watched him disappear into the crowd of children who had parents waiting for them at pickup time. As I turned away, my phone buzzed. Victor. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove straight to Child Protective Services. I told them everything. The empty fridge. The burn. The weekends alone. The cameras at the villa. I didn't embellish. I didn't have to. The truth was bad enough. They listened carefully. Took notes. Asked questions I'd already asked myself 100 times. We'll investigate, the caseworker said. Quietly at first. It should have been a relief. Instead, dread settled into my stomach. I knew Victor well enough to understand what would happen when he felt threatened. That evening, my phone rang again. Victor this time. I answered. What did you do? He snapped, voice sharp with panic. I protected your son, I said evenly. You went behind my back, Victor shouted. You think you're better than me? You think you can steal my kid? I think Leo deserves an adult who shows up, I replied. There was a long silence on the line. Then Victor laughed, cold and brittle. You always hated me, he said. Ever since Alara died, you've been looking for someone to blame. The call ended. 2 days later, CPS made an unannounced visit to Victor's apartment. They found exactly what I described. Warnings were issued. Monitoring was put in place. Victor blamed me for everything. That weekend, the cameras at the villa lit up again. Victor arrived earlier than usual. Alone this time. He stormed through the house, pacing, slamming doors, shouting into his phone. The woman didn't arrive. Instead, later that night, she appeared at the bar where she worked. I know this because I was there. I hadn't planned to be. I was meeting an old friend, Marcus, who worked in financial crimes. A quiet place, neutral ground. I walked in, ordered a drink, and froze when I saw her behind the counter. She was laughing. Flirting. Her smile easy, practiced. And sitting 2 seats away from her was a man with inked arms, a scar along his jaw, and eyes that never stopped scanning the room. I didn't look long. I didn't want to be noticed. But as I stood to leave, I heard her voice, low, confident. "He's almost there," she said. "Trust is easy when someone's desperate." The man chuckled. "Just a little longer." My stomach dropped. They weren't talking about love. They were talking about leverage. I left without saying a word, heart racing, mind working faster than it had in years. I called Marcus from the parking lot and told him what I'd heard, who I'd seen, where. There was a long pause on the line. "Nolan," Marcus said carefully, "those 2 match profiles we've been watching. Fraud. Asset stripping. They target vulnerable people with money and guilt." Victor. The realization hit me all at once. The villa. The isolation. The pressure. The neglect of Leo. Victor wasn't just failing as a father, he was being groomed. And if I was right, Ilara's death wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel, knowing one thing with terrifying clarity. If I didn't act now, I wouldn't just lose my sister's legacy. I might lose her child forever. And I had a sinking feeling that the truth I was circling would be far darker than anything I'd imagined. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Leo standing on that chair, smoke curling toward the ceiling, his small hands shaking as he tried to be brave because no one else was there to be brave for him. Then the image shifted, to Victor laughing at the villa, wine glass raised, pretending to have a new life while his son learned how to survive alone. By morning, the decision was already made. I wasn't stepping back. Not now. I called Leo before work. "Good morning, kiddo," I said softly. "Morning, uncle," he replied. His voice sounded brighter than it had in weeks, and that alone told me how fragile everything was. "Did you eat breakfast?" "Yeah. Dad left cereal." I closed my eyes. "I'll pick you up after school today, okay?" There was a pause. "Really?" "Yes. Really." I could hear the smile in his voice when he answered. "Okay." At the construction site, my hands moved automatically, measuring spans, checking stress tolerances, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I replayed Marcus's words again and again. Asset stripping. Grooming. Desperation. Victor fit the profile too well. Widower. Guilt-ridden. In debt from bad investments after Ilara's death. Owner of a valuable property in the mountains. And now emotionally entangled with someone who knew exactly how to pull the right strings. I left work early and drove to Leo's school. When he saw me at pickup, he ran, not walked, straight into my arms. He hugged me like I might vanish if he let go. Teachers watched with quiet concern. They already knew something was wrong. At my apartment, I made dinner. Real food. Warm food. Leo ate slowly this time, asking questions between bites, about bridges, about my job, about whether mountains ever get tired of standing still. That night, he slept on my couch again. I didn't take him back to Victor's apartment. The next morning, Victor showed up at my door. He didn't knock. He pounded. I opened it just enough to block his view inside. "You think you can just take him?" Victor hissed, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. "I think you've already left him," I replied. "You went to CPS. You embarrassed me. You made me look unfit. You did that yourself." He laughed, sharp and hollow. "You're enjoying this. Playing hero." "I'm playing uncle," I said flatly. "Something you forgot how to do as a father." His face darkened. "You don't understand what's at stake." That was the first time he'd said something honest. "What's at stake, Victor?" I asked. He hesitated. Just for a second. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "You stay out of my life. You stay out of my business. And I'll take care of my son." I stepped back and closed the door. Behind it, Leo was standing in the hallway, clutching his stuffed animal, eyes wide with fear. "Is Dad mad?" he asked quietly. I knelt in front of him. "Dad is confused," I said carefully. "But you're safe here." That afternoon, Marcus called again. I dug deeper, he said. "The woman, her name isn't what she told Victor. She's tied to multiple cases." "The man with her?" "Enforcer. Pressure guy. They isolate targets, convince them to sign documents they don't understand." "What kind of documents?" "Power of attorney. Property transfers. Loan guarantees. The villa." My stomach turned. "And there's something else," Marcus added. "One of their earlier cases started exactly like this. Widow. Child neglected. Family distracted. Then a sudden crime." The line went quiet. "A crime?" I asked. "Murder," Marcus said. My grip tightened around the phone. That night, the cameras at the villa activated again. Victor arrived with the woman. They argued. Loudly. I couldn't hear words, but I didn't need to. His body language screamed panic. Hers stayed calm. Then she handed him something. Papers. He read them. Shook his head. She touched his arm. Smiled. He signed. My heart dropped into my stomach. The next morning, I went straight to a lawyer. I brought documents. Screenshots. Videos. Timelines. Everything. This is serious, the lawyer said after reviewing the footage. Your nephew is at risk. And if those papers transferred ownership, the villa could already be gone. What can I do? You can act fast, she said. And you can protect the child. By noon, I filed for emergency temporary guardianship. Victor was served that same evening. He didn't come to my door this time. He went to the bar. The next call I received came from Marcus, his voice tense, clipped. Nolan, he said. Something just happened. What? There's been an incident at the bar. Police are on scene. My chest tightened. Victor turned himself in. The world seemed to tilt. For what? I whispered. There was a pause. Homicide. I dropped the phone. An hour later, the news confirmed it. The woman from the villa was dead. Stabbed during an altercation behind the bar. Victor was in custody. I looked at Leo, sitting on my couch, drawing a picture of a bridge with two stick figures standing safely in the middle. He looked up at me. Uncle, why are there police cars outside? I knelt beside him, my heart breaking in 1,000 new ways. Because some adults made very bad choices, I said. That night, as Leo slept under my roof, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This story was never just about neglect. It was about manipulation. Greed. And a truth buried 3 years ago that was finally clawing its way to the surface. And when that truth came out, it wouldn't just destroy Victor. It would rewrite everything I thought I knew about my sister's death. And I wasn't ready for what came next. The morning after Victor's arrest felt unreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life without permission. Police cars were gone by sunrise, but the echo of sirens still rang in my head. News alerts flooded my phone, short, brutal headlines that stripped everything down to facts without mercy. Local man surrenders after fatal altercation. No names yet. No details. Just enough for the world to start guessing. Leo slept through most of it. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee I never touched, staring at the wall while the sky slowly lightened. For the first time since Elara died, I wasn't running from the truth anymore. I was standing directly in front of it, and it was far bigger than I'd ever imagined. Around 9, my phone rang again. Marcus. They're holding Victor downtown, he said quietly. No bail hearing yet. And Leo? I asked immediately. CPS is involved. Given the circumstances and your report, you're the safest placement. I closed my eyes, exhaling for what felt like the first time in days. Thank you. There's more, Marcus added. Victor asked for you. The words hit harder than I expected. Why? He hasn't said. Just keeps repeating your name. I looked toward the living room where Leo lay curled up on the couch, blanket tucked under his chin, stuffed animal pressed to his chest. My decision was instant. I'll come, I said. But not with Leo. The station was cold and sterile, all gray walls and hard benches. Victor sat behind glass in an interview room, hands cuffed, shoulders slumped. He looked smaller than I remembered, hollowed out, like whatever had been holding him upright had finally given way. When he saw me, his eyes filled instantly. I ruined everything, he said before I even sat down. Yes, I replied calmly. You did. He flinched, like he'd expected anger and found something worse, finality. They lied to me, he whispered. She lied. All of it was a lie. I warned you. He nodded, tears slipping down his face. I know. I didn't listen. I thought I was smarter than everyone. Thought I deserved something better. What did you deserve, Victor? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. After a long silence, he said, I didn't mean for it to happen. I leaned forward. Did you kill her? Yes. The word landed between us, heavy and irreversible. She laughed at me, Victor continued, voice shaking. Said I was a fool. Said I was nothing without her. I lost control. And Leo? I asked quietly. Where was your son while you were losing control? His head dropped. I left him alone, he whispered. That was the moment any remaining sympathy drained out of me. Before I stood to leave, Victor spoke again. There's something else. I paused. Elara, he said. Her accident, it wasn't what they said. My heart slammed into my ribs. What do you mean? I asked slowly. Victor swallowed hard. I need to tell the truth. All of it. I can't carry it anymore. He explained in fragments at first. Rambling. Disjointed. But as the words came, a picture began to form, one so horrifying it made my hands tremble. The woman who was now dead hadn't just entered Victor's life after Elara died. She'd been there before. They met months before the accident. At the same bar. She talked about money. About insurance. About how accidents happen all the time on mountain roads. Victor insisted at first that it was just talk. Fantasy. Frustration. But over time, the conversations grew darker. More specific. Brake maintenance. Rain. Sharp turns. I felt sick. They planned it? I asked. Victor nodded, sobbing openly now. She pushed. I didn't stop it. I let it happen. The room felt like it was closing in. Did you tamper with the car? I asked. Yes. The word shattered something inside me that could never be rebuilt. When I left the station, my legs barely held me upright. Ilara's face kept flashing in my mind, her laugh, her voice, the way she hugged Leo like he was her whole universe. She hadn't died in an accident. She had been betrayed. I sat in my truck for a long time before driving home. When I walked inside, Leo was sitting at the table coloring. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "Uncle," he said brightly. "I drew us a bridge." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That night, after Leo fell asleep, I sat alone in the dark and cried for the first time in years. Not just for my sister. For the life she never got to finish. For the child who lost both parents in different ways. For the truth that had waited 3 years to be spoken. The trial came faster than I expected. Victor confessed fully. Not just to the murder at the bar, but to conspiring in Ilara's death. The investigation reopened overnight. Evidence was re-examined. Records surfaced. Patterns emerged. The world that had once shrugged and called it an accident now watched in stunned silence as the truth unraveled. I attended the hearing alone. Victor looked at me once as they led him in, no anger, no bitterness left. Just regret so deep it seemed to weigh him down. When the judge read the charges, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Only an aching emptiness where my sister should have been. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions I refused to answer. All I wanted was to go home. To Leo. Weeks passed. Guardianship paperwork was finalized. CPS visits continued, then slowly tapered off. Leo moved into my spare room permanently. We painted the walls together. Built shelves for his books. Hung his drawings on the fridge. At night, he sometimes woke up crying, asking for his mother. I held him until the shaking stopped. I didn't tell him the truth, not yet. He was too young. Too fragile. He deserved a childhood free from horrors he had no power to change. But I knew the day would come. And when it did, I would be ready. Because bridges don't just connect land. They carry weight. And some truths are heavier than steel. Still, they must be faced, one step at a time. By the time winter arrived, our life had settled into something that almost looked normal from the outside. Almost. Every morning followed the same rhythm. I woke before dawn, made coffee, packed Leo's lunch, and checked his backpack twice, homework, water bottle, the small notebook where he liked to draw bridges and future cities. He still slept curled on his side, clutching the same worn stuffed animal, but the nightmares came less often now. When he did wake up scared, he didn't scream anymore. He just padded quietly into my room and stood there until I noticed. That alone told me we were healing, slowly. The legal process, however, was far from over. Victor's confession detonated like a controlled explosion. Once prosecutors pulled on the thread, everything unraveled. Financial records surfaced. Messages were recovered. Patterns emerged that painted a picture far darker than I'd ever imagined. What I thought was greed and weakness turned out to be something colder: systematic manipulation, exploitation, and calculated cruelty. The woman Victor killed hadn't been acting alone. The investigation revealed she was part of a small but efficient network that targeted vulnerable people, widowers, emotionally unstable partners, anyone easy to influence. The goal was always the same: isolate, manipulate, extract, and discard. Ilara had been collateral damage in a plan designed to harvest money and disappear. When I learned this, I didn't feel rage. I felt sick. Because it meant Ilara had trusted the wrong man, and that trust had cost her everything. The trial stretched on for months. I testified twice. Each time, I sat under harsh lights and answered questions about my sister, my nephew, and the night I found the truth. The defense tried to soften Victor's image: grief-stricken husband, emotional breakdown, poor choices made under pressure. I didn't interrupt. I didn't react. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply told the truth, clearly and calmly. About the villa. The cameras. The child left alone. The burns on Leo's hand. The lies that stacked up until they collapsed under their own weight. Silence followed my testimony every time. Victor never looked at me again. When the verdict finally came, it was swift and absolute. Multiple life sentences. No chance of parole for decades. Conspiracy, murder, negligence, fraud. The words echoed through the courtroom, heavy and final. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I went home. That night, Leo and I sat on the living room floor building a bridge out of blocks. He concentrated hard, tongue pressed against his lip, placing each piece carefully. "This one has to hold a lot of cars," he said seriously. I smiled. "Then it needs a strong base." He nodded. "Mom said strong things last longer." I swallowed, then nodded back. She was right. As the months passed, life didn't magically become easier, but it became steadier. I sold the villa. Not in anger. Not in grief. Just, quietly. The place had served its purpose. It gave me answers when I needed them most. But it was never meant to be a home again. The money went into a trust for Leo, education, healthcare, a future his parents could no longer give him. We moved into a modest house closer to his school. It had a small yard and an old oak tree that dropped leaves everywhere in autumn. Leo immediately claimed it as the thinking tree and spent hours underneath it with his sketchbook. I adjusted my work schedule. Turned down promotions. Took fewer projects. Some people thought I was wasting potential. They didn't understand that I was finally using it for something that mattered. One evening, almost a year after everything began, Leo asked a question I'd been dreading. "Uncle," he said quietly, staring at the ceiling from his bed. "Is my dad coming back?" I sat beside him for a long moment before answering. "No," I said gently. "He won't." Leo didn't cry. He just nodded, eyes glossy. "Did he do something bad?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Yes. Something very bad." "Is that why Mom isn't here either?" I closed my eyes for a second. "Yes," I said. "But none of it was your fault. Not even a little." Leo turned toward me and buried his face in my shirt. "I miss her," he whispered. "I know," I said, holding him. "I do too." That was the night I realized something important. Healing doesn't come from hiding the truth forever. It comes from sharing it carefully, honestly, and with love. Years later, Leo stood on a stage holding a small trophy. Science fair. First place. His project? A bridge design capable of withstanding extreme stress using minimal materials. As the audience clapped, he scanned the crowd until he found me. When our eyes met, he grinned, a full, unburdened smile that looked nothing like the scared child I'd found alone in a dark apartment. In that moment, everything made sense. The pain. The waiting. The long nights. The hard choices. I hadn't been able to save my sister. But I had saved her son. And sometimes, that's how justice really works, not with anger, not with destruction, but with persistence, protection, and the quiet refusal to let evil have the final word. As we walked home that night, Leo slipped his hand into mine. "Uncle," he said casually, "when I grow up, I want to build bridges that never fall." I squeezed his hand gently. "So do I," I replied. And for the first time in a very long time, I truly believed it was possible. Thank you for listening all the way through. If my story moved you, take a second to subscribe and share where you're watching from. Some stories are meant to remind us why protecting the innocent always matters.